In our last lecture, we looked at some of the characteristics of groups, one of which was the structure. In that part of the discussion, we did not take so much time to look into group structure because then we looked at it as a characteristic. And I noted that we are going to have more time to deal with the group structure and understand it more in detail. Therefore, today, I want us to have a detailed discussion about the group structure. Our discussion will focus on two principal areas. One, the meaning of group structure, and then secondly, the elements of group structure. By elements, we simply mean some of the things that constitute a group structure. Structure generally refers to the formal arrangement or ordering of elements, parts, events, or facts in a given issue. That is the broader understanding of what a structure is, simply the arrangements or the ordering of things. With reference to group, we understand group structure as the layout of a group in terms of the roles, the norms, the statuses, and the values. Therefore, when we talk about group structure in reference to social groups or within the broader concept of group dynamics, what we basically mean is a set of relatively stable patterns of relationships between interdependent parts of the group. We noted in our previous discussion that one of the characteristics of a group is interdependence. In other words, members depend on each other, parts depend on each other, and the structures depend on each other. That is why groups or people come together to form a group, because they know that as individuals, their capacity is limited, but their capacity can be enhanced when they come together and pursue certain issues collectively. Social groups may have several structures. However, structures that are common to any social group are roles, norms, statuses, and values. I want to disabuse the notion that some of you may have that structures refers to, or those that perceive structures as physical. No, structures are not physical. In the context of groups, they are the mental or the social constructs of the group. One of the structures that we find in any social group is the roles. By roles, we mean the responsibilities or assignments that members of the group have been given, or the tasks that members of the group have been given, and in which the performance of those tasks helps a group in achieving its objectives. So that when you talk about roles, we simply mean the kind of activities, duties, or tasks that members of the group have been assigned and which from time to time they carry out in order to enable the group achieve its objectives. These roles can broadly be categorized into three. We have what we call cultural roles. Then we have what we call differentiation roles. And then the last type of role is called situational roles. By cultural roles, we mean the primary roles played by a member of the group by virtue of the position that a person holds in a given group. For instance, if you are the chairman of a group, you're the secretary of a group, you're the treasurer of a group, or organizing secretary of a group, there are certain roles that have been assigned to you in view of the position that you hold in that particular group. Such roles that you play by virtue of the position one holds in a group are the one that we call cultural roles. Then there are roles that we call differentiation roles. These are roles that are assigned to people according to their line of training or profession. For instance, in any organization, there are certain tasks that are specialized, and in which case, only individuals with the training and appropriate experience can be assigned those roles. These roles, for instance, if it's a hospital setting, a doctor, the role of treating, diagnosing, and treating patients or sick people is assigned to a doctor by virtue of the training that that doctor has received. If there are financial issues to be carried out in an organization professionally, again, we look at a person who has been trained in that particular field, and that is an accountant, somebody with accounting background. So roles that we undertake in organizations because we qualify to undertake them by virtue of the training that we have received and the experience that we have gained over the years. Such roles, we call them differentiation roles. Then there are roles that we call situational roles. Situational roles are roles that we take up in any organization or in any group because of the situation that demands. For instance, a chairman of a group might at any one time, because of the demands of the situation, play the role of a secretary because the secretary is not available. And because certain things need to be done and secretarial work needs to be done, then somebody can be asked to step in to undertake those roles. Again, for instance, assuming that an organization or a group has a security guard, but the guard is not able to turn up for work, either because of sickness, bereavement, or other reasons, or merely desertion of duty, then some members of the organization are asked to step in and guard the company or guard the premises for, say, just one night as another guard is being sought and getting recruited. That particular role that the person performs, but which do not fall within their traditional or assigned roles, those roles, we call them situational roles. Still with regard to roles, individual group members may exercise roles, conflict, role strain, and even role exit in the discharge of their roles in the group. When we talk about role conflict results from what we call the competing demands of two or more roles that one individual is meant to undertake. For instance, if you are the CEO of an organization and it happens that the same organization you have one of your close relatives. It could be your son, your daughter, close cousin, or any other relative. And it happens that this particular individual has committed an offense that requires, say, punishment by dismissal. It might not be easy for a CEO to dismiss a relative in the same manner he or she would if that particular employee was not related to him or her in any other way. So when you talk about role conflict, it means our inability to fully discharge our roles because of one or more roles that is we are subjected to, but these roles appear to be competing for our attention and our responsibilities. Then we have what we call role strain. Role strain occurs when the role is too demanding, leading to stress and burden to the individual. For example, a manager may be expected to undertake several activities. For instance, he or she might be expected to give a keynote address during AGM meeting. The same manager also happens to be a parent, and either on the same day or a day before or after, he or she is expected to attend a parent's meeting where his child is schooling, and at the same time, the same manager happens to have lost a relative and is expected to attend the funeral. All this will bear on the individual. So when you talk about role strain, we simply mean a situation in which we find ourselves undertaking so much work that becomes at times unbearable, and in the process we get stress, we experience stress, and also we feel burdened. Then we have what we call role exit. Role exit refers to the process of discontinuing from a role in order to establish a new one. For instance, a member of the group who is expected to be going out with social friends in order to attend weekly group meetings. For instance, maybe put in a simple term, you may belong to a group, at the same time you have your cycle of friends. There are instances in which you might be required to forego going with your friends out in order to create time to attend to group activities. So when you talk about role exit, it means that there are times when you need to forego certain roles that are bestowed on you, either officially or unofficially, for you to concentrate on other roles. For instance, again, if, say, you are a newly married person and you still have a cycle of friends, sometimes it may demand of you to dissociate yourself from your friends for a while in order to concentrate and focus on your marriage. Build it so that the foundation is strong. Otherwise, if an individual were to continue with both roles, then indeed at the end of the day, one of the roles is likely to suffer, and in the process, the effectiveness, his or her effectiveness in the discharge of certain responsibilities might come into question. Norms is yet another important element of the group structure. And norms refer to the rules about what should or should not be done, or what should be said or not said, or what we need to think and not think in a given situation. Norms generally provides groups with the guidelines for everyday activities so that we go back to norms when we have grievances to address. We also go back to norms when we have conflicts to resolve. And we go back to norms when we have decisions that do not have straight away answers. So basically, when we talk about norms, we simply mean the guidelines that are valuable in organizations and for which members use when or make reference to when they want to make certain decisions. Norms vary from one group to another and may also apply to different categories of people within the same organization. So that if you have Group A the norms that apply there might not be the same that apply in Group B. For instance, certain guidelines that say the chairman of a group is required to observe in Group A might not be the same that the chairman in that other group is required to observe. That's why we are observing that norms vary from one group to another, and they may also apply to different categories of people within the same group. For instance, take the case of norms that talk about punctuality at work. While generally it's expected that everybody must be punctual, but the requirements of punctuality tends to be more on the lower cadre employees compared to the senior employees, so that it is possible for a senior employee to be late for work with a few minutes compared, say, to a cleaner who has to report to office fairly much early, open up the room, open up the office, clean it, and make everything ready for the manager or for his seniors. Otherwise, if he were to be late and the seniors report ahead of him and find everything not properly arranged, then that might attract a severe punishment compared to, say, when a senior manager reports to work late. That's why we say these norms might vary from one category of employee or one category of a member to the other. Norms can generally be divided into 4 broad types. We have what we call the folkways, we have what we call the mores, then we have what we call taboo, and then we have the laws. Folkways are behaviors that we learn and share in a group, and even if we violate them, they do not attract a lot of punishment. Instead, we are only rebuked. For instance, it is required of citizens to call elected members of parliament honorable members, to refer to the president his or her excellency, and religious leaders also, they have certain titles that sometimes we're required to refer to them. So by observing that, the rules that require us to address such individuals using those titles may fall into what we call as folkways, or simply a rule that requires us that when you extend your hand to greet somebody, then the person should actually accept the greeting. But sometimes we don't do that. And even if you don't do that, we might not be heavily punished for not observing, say, norms under what we call the folkways. Then we have the mores. Mores are norms about morality, about what is right, about what is wrong. And the violations of these ones may be considered offensive to most people in any given culture, such as a child or parental neglect. If, so for instance, it's expected of us to take care of the young ones, of our children, to take care of the elderly, so that when children grow up and they become adults, it's expected of them to take care of their elderly parents. But sometimes we fail to do so. And in failing to do so, we are breaking what we call the normative behaviors that fall under the mores. And in that case, it will be considered wrong, immoral, to neglect your parents and to neglect your children. And therefore, the violations of these makes members of society feel offended. However, again, such offense might only be punished through, say, public ridicule, but not so much. The punishment is not all that severe. The punishment is more to do with inflicting psychological and emotional pain on the offender, rather than the physical pain. Then we have what we call a taboo. A taboo is a very negative norm whose violation not only upset people but also attracts punishment of various degree. For instance, incest. We are required at all times to ensure that we don't develop sexual relationship with people whom we are related with. But sometimes people go against that, and when people go against that, such is a taboo. Or engaging in sexual relationship with persons of unsound mind, for instance, or minors, that is a taboo. Taboo simply means that there's a boundary within which certain behaviors are not tolerated. And if we happen to go beyond those boundaries, then culturally we stand to be punished. The punishment here again can be both psychological as well as moral. Certain times, physical pain is inflicted on the offenders in addition to ridicule and also shaming them. In some cultures, persons who have been found to be engaging in incest are ostracized and declared outcasts and no longer enjoy the privileges that members of any given family, clan, or society enjoy. They are treated as outsiders. Then we have what we call the laws. Laws is the last category of norms. Laws are social norms that have become formally inscribed at the state or federal level and whose violations result in formal punishment. Laws basically are now written, they are now codified, and they are now we have institutions that have been established to ensure their enforcement and to punish individuals that have violated them. For instance, violations such as rape, murder, robbery, among others, are punishable by law. And the punishment sometimes might include death sentence or life imprisonment or very long terms of imprisonment, sometimes imprisonment with hard labor. This is because they are serious norms that at all times members are required to observe, and their violation can attract heavy punishment, including death in some cases. The other element of group structure is called statuses. By statuses rather, we refer to the socially defined positions in a group. And these positions go with certain expectations, certain rights, as well as duties. In short, when you talk about status, we simply mean the position an individual holds in an organization. These statuses can be grouped into three types. We have what we call ascribed status, achieved status, and master status. If we take, say, an organization like a university, chancellor is a status, vice chancellor is a status, instructors or lecturers is status, students is status, other support staff is also status. Now, let's look at each of these types of statuses. We start by looking at ascribed status. Ascribed status is one that society assigns to an individual on the basis of factors that are beyond the control of such an individual. For instance, being male or female, being of a given race, or being affiliated to a given ethnic group. These are statuses that are assigned to us. We have no control over them. Society delineates certain sex as male and others as female. The same thing to ethnic groups, among others. Again, sometimes we are born into certain socioeconomic status. For instance, you can be born into a wealthy family, and by virtue of that, you are perceived as wealthy. Again, you can be born into a poor family. Again, on the basis of that, you achieve that status by virtue of your parental association. So when you talk about ascribed status, they are status that we have and which we have no control over them. It is society that assigns them to us. Achieved status is one which is acquired on the basis of merit. For instance, being a lawyer, being a college professor, being a father, being a teacher, being a president, being a minister, and others. These are status that we find ourselves in because of certain hard work that we have gone through and we've achieved. For instance, not everybody can be a lawyer, but being a lawyer requires extensive education, many years of which are also done at university level. Or being a college professor, again, you have to undergo a rigorous process from a junior tutor into a college professor. Again, being a father is an effort. You must marry, form a family for you to qualify as a father. So achieved status are a status that we acquire on the basis of hard work. We have achieved them, in other words. Then we have what we call master social status. This is the most prominent status of all the statuses an individual may have. For instance, if you are a president, you have the status of being a president. You are also a father. You are also maybe you belong to a given a membership committee, among others. So if a person has several statuses, but one is more prominent than the rest, then the most prominent of all the statuses an individual hold is what we call master social status. I've given you the example of a president. You will know a person more as a president and very little of the other statuses that he or she might have. The last structure that you want to look at, rather the last element of group structure that you want to look at is called the values. Values simply means agreements in an organization or a group about what people consider as good and bad, as right and wrong, as desirable and undesirable in any given social setting. For instance, in a classroom setting, what do we consider as good and bad behavior? What do we consider as right and wrong? And what do we consider as desirable and undesirable? That is what we mean by value. Now, there are two types of values. These are terminal and instrumental values. By terminal values, we mean those values that individuals consider as the most important or most desirable and relate to issues such as happiness, self-respect, recognition, inner harmony, leading a prosperous life, and then professional excellence. In other words, when you talk about terminal values, they are those things that people consider as the most important or most desirable. Indeed, all of us would want to be happy, would want to be respected, would want to be recognized wherever we are, and we also want to have an internal harmony. We all also need and desire to lead a prosperous life and also to excel in our professions, either as students and later on as workers. But even as we desire this, there is something that we call instrumental values. Instrumental values now refers to what individuals consider as the acceptable means of achieving the terminal values. For instance, you want to be an excellent student. You want to attain first-class honors. What do students consider as the most acceptable means of achieving that first-class honors? Ordinarily, as an institution, as a university organization, the student is expected to achieve that through being honest, through being sincere, and being ethical in their conduct, and also being ambitious. In other words, the acceptable route that an individual is expected to achieve his or her terminal values is one that is honest, is sincere, is ethical, and also entails pure hard work. But again, we also need to notice that not every individual values this. Some people might want to use an orthodox means to get rich. For instance, engaging in criminal activities as a means of getting rich, engaging in dishonest behavior, such as stealing of exams, cheating in exams, as a means of getting good grades, among others. So when you talk about instrumental values, it's about what we believe is the right and acceptable means of achieving our desirable end in life. Those are the elements of group structures that is important for us to know at this level. Again, take note of any issue that is not clear so that we can spare time and look at it when we meet. Thanks for your time and thanks for listening.